joining. We'll just wait a couple more minutes to give everyone the chance to join, and then we'll shortly start.
Okay, so people are very slowly coming in, but maybe we can already start and we will keep admitting the people that then come a bit later.
Sure. Okay. Well, hello and welcome everyone to our 7th and final climate justice webinar under the title Inspiration Talk and Community Strengthening. In this webinar, we will focus on learning from young and passionate climate activists about their ambitions, challenges, and recommendations. This peer-to-peer exchange aims to inspire to end the webinar series with a feeling of unity and solidarity for the common cause of climate justice. This webinar is very dear to our hearts as we really wanted to appreciate and value the astonishing work young climate activists have done over these past years. I think we often picture what the ideal activist looks like, but I think it's the diversity and the many different perspectives, experiences, and expertise that all together strive for climate justice for all that make the climate movement so special. And we are lucky to have 3 of these important voices with us today. For those of you who have been to one of our other webinars, this is nothing new, but for those joining for the first time, a little introduction about this project. This webinar is, as I said, the 7th and final within the Climate Justice for All webinar series that the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy is jointly hosting with our friends at the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. Climate Justice for All, an approach to intersectional and feminist climate action is a series of 7 webinars throughout 2021, aiming to empower activists, academia, policymakers, and civil society in using climate advocacy and implementation strategies in the framework of the SDGs through an intersectional feminist lens. Each event speaks to different target audiences and focuses on knowledge exchange, joint learning, and the creation of safe spaces and networking. The goal is to open the floor to as many people as possible so they can be heard, but also to make people aware of the topics they usually avoid or are simply not aware of. After finalizing the series today, we will soon publish a policy briefing entailing the main takeaways from all webinars, as well as a video summary. And now some information about the event. In a second, I will hand over to my dear colleague, Jessica Besch from the Ban Ki-moon Center. And after, we will introduce our speakers, start with the panel discussion and the questions to our speakers. Going deeper into each area of expertise of our speakers, we will go into breakout rooms of about 20 minutes to give you the opportunity to ask questions and dive deeper into the topics. We will then come back to the main room and close the session together after our speakers share their vision for the future. During the discussion in the main room, please stay muted. In case you have a question, you can write in the chat or save it for the breakout rooms. And with that said, I will pass on to Jessica now and just say it's an honor to have you all with us today. And yeah, just hope for an interesting and exciting discussion.
Thank you, Sheena, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Sadly, it's our very last webinar, but that's why we thought we would make it a little bit more interactive and therefore start with a Mentimeter. In case you don't know what that is, my colleague will share the screen and give you some guidance, because you can either scan the QR code or go to menti.com, and we will have a few questions just to get to know you and get to know what you think about certain topics. Just as a little warm up, yeah, just so that you know, your answers are anonymous. So this is a very good way to also get to know the other people that you are with here today. And the Mentimeter code is 39701485. And if you see the first question already, then you can already gladly answer. And in a few seconds, we will switch to the first question so that everybody can see it. And I hope that you could all enter. This is a very nice way to start an event. I think we use this very often. Okay, maybe we can go to the first question, please. Okay, some people have already voted, perfect. So do you believe that we will achieve the Paris Climate Agreement goal of limiting the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels? We have 1 yes, 5 no, and 1 not sure. Okay, I thought this question would be very interesting to see how many optimists and realists we have here. Yes, I could also not really say what my answer would be. It's a bit difficult because sometimes I'm a bit more optimistic, and then there are days where I'm like, oof, this will be difficult. Okay, but thank you for your honesty. And I think we will go to the next question. So what are your expectations and wishes for this year's COP26 in Glasgow? I don't know if some of you will go. I'm sure that our speakers will be there and have some interesting discussions and also some wishes and expectations. So what are you wishing for? What are your expectations? I mean, this year's COP will probably also be a bit different because of COVID. But we, of course, hope that it will be very constructive. A global Green New Deal, more funding for climate adaptation. Yes, at the Ban Ki-moon Center, we're also very much hoping for that. Wishes, a miracle. Listen to most affected people and areas and hear their demands. This is also what we are discussing here today. Maybe something else that has not been said yet. You can also type in more answers than just one. You can submit multiple times. Okay, but if not, then we will go up. Less talking, more actions. Yes, definitely. Good coverage in the news. Yes, and especially representation of also marginalized groups. Okay. Really commit to realistic and practical actions. Yes, that's a good one. New healthy world. Yes, combining climate and health. Okay, thank you. I think we will now move to the next question. This is a bit more personal, but it has come up more and more during our webinars, and I thought that this was really interesting. So what do you do when you or the people around you feel anxious about the future and the climate crisis? I think we all know that sometimes we read the news and it's just too much and we feel overwhelmed. And what recommendations do you give your friends or your family or just people in a webinar, you know, that ask these questions? I see more people are coming in. Okay. Get outside and connect with other activists. take actions together. Yes, just getting that feeling that you are not alone is always very important. Read a book by activists. Cry and let it out. Yes, we all need that sometimes. Breathe. Yes. In nature, especially. Talk about it. Yes. Watch the stars. Very nice recommendations. Meet people. Now we can do that more and more. I mean, we're still in the midst of the pandemic, but there's more ways now to really physically meet people. It's really different than online virtual connections. Positive books. Yes, positive energy. Okay, great. Thank you. And now the last question. Thank you so much for participating so actively. So what projects could organizations like the Ban Ki-moon Center and the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy implement to support young activists in their everyday fight against climate change? So what would you like to see coming from organizations like us? Now we had the climate justice webinar series. What could be something that we're doing next year? What is something meaningful that we could implement? There are always so many ideas, but it's also good to know what is really needed out there. Bringing together activists, coalition building, giving young activists a platform. Awareness of the importance of world health through various seminars. So health is coming up. Building bridges to the educational system and support education about the topics in schools and universities. Yes, definitely. And offer their platform, connect activists with people in power, listen more to marginalized activists, promote intersectionality, being a bridge between policymakers and activists. Support existing projects with the platform reach you have. Yeah, you don't always have to reinvent the wheel, but just take what we have and maybe improve it, right? Support to local organizations and then connecting them, coordinating across groups to, I can't read what's coming after this. Thank you, Katarina. Campaigning for specific motions. Okay, thank you very much. We will take this into account when we're having our next meeting and when we are brainstorming about our next projects. So thank you so much. This was it from the Mentimeter, from the interactive side. Thank you. And we will now move on to introducing our speakers. Nisrin is not here yet, but she will join in 5 to 10 minutes, but I will gladly introduce her because she is an amazing environmental and climate activist and started activism in 2012. She has a bachelor's degree in physics from the University of Khartoum, Sudan, and pursued her master's degree in renewable energy from the same university. She is the general coordinator for Youth and Environment Sudan platform, which gives youth networking in the environmental sector the networking they need. So we talked a lot about networking before, right? She is also the chair of Sudan Youth Organization on Climate Change. And as part of many regional and international platforms, she led and mentored a large number of young people with Yungu, Abu Dhabi Youth Voices, and others. Nisrin is also a junior negotiator with the African Group of Negotiators in Technology Transfer, focusing on the policies of countries regarding climate change and renewable energies. She wrote several policy papers on climate change, renewable energy, gender, and youth empowerment. She was also recently chosen to chair the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change, along with 6 other young climate activists. And I believe this was in July 2020. So you will meet Nisrin soon when she's back, but I will now give the floor to Sheena to introduce the other speakers.
Thank you. Yes, it is now my honor to introduce Jannie Staffansson. Jannie is living on the Arctic Circle, and I'm sure I will mispronounce this. Is it Jokkmokk and Sapmi? Is it? Sapmi? Okay. And Jannie belongs to the indigenous people of Scandinavia and northwest of Russia, the Sami. She's from a reindeer herding family, and her partner is also a reindeer herder. Jannie is currently focusing on educating herself in the ways of Sami and strengthening her indigenous knowledge in relation to reindeer herding. She's self-employed, working as a consultant, assisting Sami organizations and communities with projects often in relation to climate change, capacity building, or indigenous people's rights. And we're super happy to have you with us today. And then our final speaker for today is Anna Fiesinger, 28 years old, and she was born and lives in Germany. She's a marine biologist by trade and just finished her master's degree, congrats, and is a climate justice activist. She's been active with the Students for Future Germany. If you're not following them yet, do so, they're incredible. And yeah, she's been with them since the beginning. Specifically, Anna focuses on organizing and promoting the public climate school, an alternative climate school format that the Students for Future hold twice every year at universities all over Germany. And due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as a week-long YouTube live stream since last year. She's passionate about outreach, and she also conducts this through a podcast with a friend about marine science. Anna also focuses on climate adaptation in corals and truly believes we should listen to the science when it comes to climate change. And yes, also super happy to have all three of you here. And I would start with the first question to you, Anna. And yeah, as I just introduced you as an activist with Students for Future, can you maybe share some more information about how your personal activism started, but also the Students for Future and how you organize internally? And maybe also how do you practice team spirit within, aside from like the shared goals you have when it comes to climate justice?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the introduction. I hope everyone can hear me well. Okay, great. Yeah, as you've said already in your introduction, I'm not that young anymore. I'm 28 years old. So that means, of course, like my activism has already started way before Fridays for Future existed. I was active with Greenpeace for a while and also other like citizens initiatives. But since Fridays for Future started, I've been basically active with both Fridays for Future groups and also the Students for Future, because I enjoyed a lot, or I found this very important that the climate movement as it exists now has finally come away from this climate change is only a matter for like the eco-friendly, zero waste living people, but it's actually a climate justice issue. It's an issue for every single person on this planet. And so ever since Fridays for Future formed, I've been active with, like I said, both Fridays for Future groups locally, but also all over Germany, and also the Students for Future. And as the Students for Future, we see ourselves, or we are a part of the structures of Fridays for Future. Like we're always in exchange with a lot of Fridays for Future groups. And we, of course, support their strikes and their demonstrations and everything and the demands that they have. But we also form our own little groups that deal, like, you've introduced before, mainly with issues that concern universities and also schools, for example. We look a lot into education and how climate justice can be implemented in educational programs in universities, but also in schools. And we organize ourselves mainly also through Zoom calls, of course, because we sit all over Germany. And so, yeah, a lot of activism goes through our computers, of course. We talk frequently, always in like little working groups. We have working groups that deal, for example, with the public climate school, but also with other issues that we do with the Students for Future. And in terms of team building, we finally, for the first time this year, been able to meet in person. We met in this in this youth center where a lot of us got together and finally got to exchange our visions and also have like a beer together in the evening and so on and so forth. So I think this is of course very important to also see each other in person now that it's kind of okay again in Germany with the regulations. And otherwise, through like in the Zoom meetings, of course, there are different things that you can do. You can, have a little breaks where you do a little dance together in front of your screen so that you're not so bored in a 1 hour or 2 hour meeting. And those are, of course, little things that we also do to kind of like raise the spirit.
Thank you so much for sharing, and we'll come back to that and the Students for Future in particular in a second. I would now go on with a question to Jani with slightly different perspective, but also focusing on young activists, of course. But Jani, coming to you. I think I mentioned this also in like when I invited you to speak here, but I often have the feeling that, especially in Europe, people think that the climate crisis is something that is happening like super far away. It's not here yet. And that it threatens people, all the people on this planet the same way. But yet we know that it is marginalized people like, for example, Black, Indigenous, and people of color or low-income people that are mostly threatened by the climate crisis. That only exacerbates existing inequalities, even here in Europe. And so my question to you would be, how do you make a case for the Sami people and marginalized people in general? And when you are in spaces that do not seem very aware of these multiple layers that the climate crisis has, maybe you can share some of your insights on that.
Thank you, Sheena, for the question, and thank you all for inviting me here today. I'm super excited to talk to you and hear more from my colleagues. So there are, of course, multiple layers in your question as well, depending on where I'm at the moment. It's you have to make different case. But first and for all, maybe it's important to raise media, the media question and how it's covered. And I think that much of the fact that it has been kind of difficult for us and getting our voices through is because the media isn't covering Indigenous issues. In Sápmi, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Russia, it's very difficult for us to get our voices through. And therefore, for me, I noticed that getting Swedish allies or Norwegian was the most effective way for me to get my voice through. So allies have been super important for me internationally to get our countries to understand how affected we are. Because, of course, when climate change is happening, those who are depending on and living with nature are equally affected and equally threatened. And I don't think that, for example, EU, when it was formed, reflected on the fact that they do have Indigenous peoples in EU as well. And therefore, they have to respect the Indigenous people's rights as well. And that have maybe been one of the first cases that I raised when I talked to EU about our situations and listening to us and providing a space for us within those rooms at those tables. And I think it's a bit different for Indigenous peoples, for example, when you compare to maybe civil society, because we have the right to self-govern our people and our system and our land, which is for others, civilians in, for example, Sweden and Norway, Finland, it's covered by their parliaments. But we also have our politicians and leaders that we have voted to represent us. So when, for example, EU is having those talks within those rooms, they're not representing us. And that is the case that the entire world of Indigenous peoples are saying that those who colonized us do not represent us or carry our voices. We need also to be at that table. And when we are not, there are millions of voices left behind and shut out. So in terms of shifting that, those have been my strongest tools of advocacy, but doing so in an Indigenous way of storytelling, of sharing, of speaking to people's morals of what is right and not, and letting them know the proof that we do have of that 80% of the world's biodiversity is on the Indigenous people's lands. So meaning that we are making some good stuff and good choices that need to be heard, in particular in the rooms when you talk about climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and strategy. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, I think we have Nisreen with us, so we would come back to that, but now go on with the next question.
Hi, Nisreen. Good to see you again. We already introduced you, and I would move on to your first question, if that's okay for you. And yeah, I just told everyone about your accomplishment in your election as chair of the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group. That was in July 2020, if I'm not mistaken. Congratulations. That's a very important role. And I'm very curious, and I think our audience is too, to learn a little bit more about your pathway as a climate activist and also as a negotiator in international climate spaces. Have you encountered any challenges along the way due to being a young woman from Africa? Because unfortunately, the international climate sphere is still very male and Western dominated. So what are you doing in your everyday life to overcome these challenges? And what advice can you give other young activists who feel like they maybe don't belong to these places because they are still so male and Western dominated?
Thank you very much, Jessica, and I'm very glad to be here. Sorry for the delay. Well, yes, life is a continuous challenge, and every time we say like, well, that's it, nothing more, something new come up. So, and I feel like every challenge is just a practice for the next challenge. And well, in my daily life, normally I get a lot of like criticalism, and not just because I'm a female or from Africa or something like this, but most of the criticizing points were about my age actually. So I suffered from ageism more than I suffered from racism, for example, or Islamophobia, for example, because I'm also Muslim, or like I'm just coming from Sudan or something like this. So being a young person is really hard thing, and it shouldn't be like this. So I'm really trying to reflect and promote other young people also around me, because we always say that if you want to walk far, then we walk together. And I think the fight and the journey against ageism and against criticizing the young people just because they are young, in spite of their role, in spite of their knowledge, in spite of their experiences, is really not fair. Secondly, one of the things that I face every day is, so there are three types of people. Number one is hard workers. Number two are not hard workers, but they keep their like criticism from themselves. And the third part, which is not hard worker and also keep their and doesn't keep their criticism for themselves. So a lot of times young people are surrounded by number three, who are people who are not active and they don't really want to change things around them. But yet, if you want to do something, they just criticize you. I think number three is resources issue. Coming from Africa and especially from Sudan is a really hard thing, because it doesn't matter how brilliant your idea is. It doesn't really matter how much people will going to use from it. It doesn't really matter how genuine you are about your idea or your innovation or your action that you want to take. It's almost impossible to secure resources for that. And I say almost impossible because there are small windows happening here and there, but yet they are not really enough for the progress of the process in general. I think my fourth and last will be the community sometimes. Being a female in a conservative society is really hard thing. I mean, I think my situation was better, but around me, a lot of young girls cannot go to school because we still suffer from early marriage. A lot of young girls can, even if they finished school, they cannot go to university unless if they are married, for example. A lot of young female, even if they finished university, cannot travel abroad because in our culture it's not okay for females to travel abroad alone. So if she has to take a brother or a father or a husband, which is the preferred thing with her. So I think I will add a fifth one, which is when you live in a country like Sudan where there's hundreds of problems, you cannot just work in silos in climate change, because climate change doesn't only impact the environment, it impacts everything. So you find yourself in a position that you are a peace builder, you are a climate advocate, you are a feminist, you are like almost working in everything, because the gap is very big and there is a need everywhere. So how I overcome these challenges? By just moving forward and getting a lot of sleep. Sleeps help a lot in your health, mental health and physical health also, and also it clears my mind. So even if I'm upset about something, when I go to sleep I just forget what I'm upset about. And of course going forward, because when you believe in your story, or when you believe in your cause, then you just keep going and going, and by going forward, every time you move one step, one hater will step down. Every time you go one step further, one challenge will go down. Every time you keep just moving, one closed door will be open, and so on. It's not easy. It's time consuming, energy consuming, focus consuming, sometimes also financially consuming, because sometimes you have to do what you have to do even if you don't have resources for that. And yeah, I'm very lucky also to have support of my colleagues from the youth advisory group, but also from the climate change movement in general. And I think this is very precious to have a family supporting us.
Thank you, Nisrin. I really like your energy and your positive attitude, and also the intersectionality that you just brought in. I mean, yeah, this is also why we wanted to call it climate justice, because it's not only about the climate itself, but there's so many layers on top of it as well. And I think we will move to the next question for Anna now.
Yes. And I think you talked about this briefly already, but yeah, just going deeper into how or what kind of role universities can play or should play. Yeah, I know you're already doing a great job with the public climate school, but what would you say, how do universities, in your experience, approach climate justice, and has there been any change lately? And what would be your wishes and demands towards universities as these major and sometimes very powerful educational institutions when it comes to tackling the climate crisis and approaching climate justice?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I have a very long answer.
Nisreen, I'm so sorry. So sorry. I'll
Not
just
me?
interrupt. What? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'll just interrupt you for a second here. I would take this question to Anna first, but I would come back to you if you want to add something. I would love to hear it. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I can, of course, only answer this in my own realm of Germany. Maybe Nisrin has, another viewpoint in this that I obviously don't have as a white German. In my opinion, universities are not doing enough at all, if anything at all, because one of our, also as Students for Future, demands would be first to address the privilege that universities have. Like you've said that they're massive educational institutions, and that is correct. Like, of course, we have a big, they have a big impact, they have a big power, they have, educational, like the educational system is huge in many countries. And we need education to build the change that we want to see, because we need to address issues openly, and also in the right way. Like not just universities, but also schools have a big, like they need to address climate change in its like roots, as in we need to talk about racism, we need to talk about colonialism, we need to talk about all these things if we're supposed to address climate change and if we're supposed to talk about climate justice at all. And this is not happening broadly enough, in my opinion. So first of all, we need to recognize the privilege that many people that do go to university have, like that it is a privilege to go to university, to be able to continue with your education. So making it more accessible to marginalized people is one step that really needs to be done. Like we see most universities in Germany have a very privileged, like most people that go to university in Germany have a very privileged academic background. It's very difficult for low income households to send their children to university. All these things are justice issues. Those are things that need to be addressed when we look at who can actually get the education that we want them to get, sort of. But also the curriculum in most courses and most studies is not sufficient. Like, for example, I studied like a natural science. I studied environmental science, and then I went on to move to study marine biology. Of course, we're talking about climate change all the time, but we're not talking about the impacts that this has on us humans. We're not talking about climate justice at all. Of course, it's maybe this is a bit too much to expect from a natural science diploma. And if we look into different courses, we may find certain lecturers and certain professors here and there that have this topic, that are passionate about this topic and that implement this in their curriculum. But those are single people. This is not, the educational system in itself is not built on actually providing this education, on actually providing the background to this, so that people actually understand why there is a need for change and why we need the systems to completely move around, like to completely change. Because in the system that we live in now, we're not going to find justice. And this is something that needs to be addressed with education, not just in universities, but also, of course, in schools and with smaller children. I hope this answers the question.
It does. Thank you so much. And I share your critique also with having the background on Germany, but actually coming from a low income family and going to university, and it is no joke. So yeah, that's I'm guessing not a very Germany specific issue, unfortunately. Yes, thank you so much. And yeah, Nisreen, if you wanted to share your thoughts on that, please go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick idea, adding to what Anna just mentioned. Well, the university have a big role to play. It's a massive gathering of young people who are actually able to take actions to climate change, and also able to pressure the policymakers and the decision makers in their countries. Yet, not enough has been done in universities, and that's for many reasons. One, it's a governance and policy issues. Many countries doesn't have a policy or governance structure where university are in the heart of this educational process or this learning process for topics other than the academic topics itself. It's very rare to find universities that allow you to take, for example, a course on peace and security where we are doing physics, for example. So this specific vision of university systems to only tackle what your academic curricula is just mentioning is really handicapping a lot. Secondly, actually, to work in a big scale in universities, not only in Germany, but around the world, it needs a massive investment. And by investment, I don't mean buildings and labs and so on, but I mean that the educators themselves, the trainers themselves, the experts that will go and talk to students themselves, it needs huge mobilization, and I don't think the world is ready, unfortunately, for that. It's not their priority right now. They just want to make more young people silent, not to make more young people out in the streets striking for climate justice, or becoming climate negotiators, or publishing papers on how their government is doing regarding climate climate emissions and different things. So it's not the center of attention, and I don't think it will be as soon if we did not do it ourselves. So yeah, let's try to do it ourselves.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, couldn't agree more. I would, to take it back a little from the university perspective to an international perspective, as we have COP26 coming up, but also many other similar events. And my question to Jani would be, especially on this international level, I feel like the formats to talk about climate justice are very hierarchical, very structured, and not very approachable for a civil society. What kind of formats and like spaces do you wish for that could offer opportunities for especially young climate activists to come together and work on solutions?
Yeah, thank you. No, I would agree with that. It's difficult within the international arena to get some influence, especially I think for civil society. It's difficult for civil society to get the voice through. However, it's possible. So leading to the Paris Agreement, we had a strong voice for human rights and indigenous people's rights to get that into the agreement and it was kind of an in and out process. It was, we managed to fight those words in the Paris Agreement by evening, and by morning it was gone. And I think for us, the most important thing that was us collaborating, was us networking, having the means to do so and the resources to actually participate, but also involving social media and having that network between organizations beforehand. So I think, as with all major questions when it comes to human rights or women rights and voting right, for example, organization is the most important thing. And for me, when I was a young woman, I participated within a Sami youth organization, and we were invited to a global gathering of activists that took place in Istanbul, where we got to have a lot of workshops and learn about climate activism. And that network has been very important for me, both nationally but internationally as well. And also creating and showing young people that being brave and standing up for your voice and believing in your voice, as Nisrin was talking about, that you know that you have the right. No one is going to give you that right. You have to fight for it. And we see that we continuously have to fight for it, as particularly as women, but also for Indigenous peoples. We claim to have self-governance, that we are the fair and right governance for the land. Unfortunately, a lot of our fights take place in court. And we actually yesterday got a court case from the Norwegian highest court saying that the Norwegian government is in fault and are violating the rights of the human rights of the Sami, the right that we have to be able to do our cultural human rights. So that was a big thing for us, but it shouldn't have to go to court. And that's the sad thing, that we continuously have to do so. But I think organization, networking, having media on our side and social media is super important, influential means of changing that.
Thank you, and congratulations on the court ruling. And it's really nice how you said that it shouldn't go this far, right? We should have this universal, I mean, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights should somehow be in us, and we should not have to, take all of these steps and use our energy for something like this, but rather to create a world where we are all in solidarity. So Nisrin, I will come to the last question to you. And as you already said, you are from Sudan, a country that has experienced more and more severe weather conditions like droughts and floods. And your country has also been exposed to an ongoing civil war and civilian unrest. So what is the link here between climate change and conflict in Sudan? And what role do youth play in peace building and supporting climate action in such environments?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jessica, for this question. Well, as I mentioned earlier, climate change doesn't only impact climatic factors in Sudan, it impacts non-climatic factors too. And by non-climatic factor, I mean the food security, I mean the water security, I mean the poverty line, because most of the income generation right now it comes from nature or natural resources like agriculture, like pastoralism, and so on. It also impacts the migration movement in the country, because human beings are survival creatures, and if a drought or a flood happen, they will not just wait and die there. They will of course move to another area. And this movement to another area is not always safe, and it's not always the best thing to do, because whatever host community they will face, they will also have embedding resources. And of course, the host community will be defensive towards the very little resources they have, and they will not be able to share it with others because it's little in the first place. So a very expected conflict might happen here. The other way is some tribes decide to stay where they are and not move to another area, but then most of their young people or their elders decide to become, for example, thieves or so on. So they go to another area who have resources and try to maybe take their resources from them, like not movement, a big movement or something like this. The third one is conflicts based on routes for pastors and farmers. Normally in the equilibrium situation in Sudan, pastors move south in the winter, and during this movement, they fertile the land by the natural fertiles from the different cattle. They also harvest, not cultivate the land with their hoofs and so on. And it was a very nice and homogeneous relationship between pastors and farmers. And then the cattle also get to eat the leftover, the grass and so on. And when the rainy season comes, the land is already ready for the agricultural process. And by the summertime, when the pastorers wants to move north back, the farmer already harvested all of the cash crops and sell it in the market and so on, and the process repeats itself. But because of climate change, now seasons became irregular. Sometimes summer come early, sometimes we don't have winter in the first place, sometimes the rainy season start late, sometimes the rainy season starts early, and this order of seasons and the rain patterns made like the farmers in a tight position, also the pastorers, because they had to move south earlier. The cattle eat the cash crop itself, so the farmer killed the cattle, the pastor killed the farmer, so the farmer tribe decided to kill the pastor, so the pastor, the tribe decided to take revenge, and so on. The cycle actually continues, unfortunately. So there is a lot of derivations, and most of them are directly linked to natural resources, because our community is directly linked to nature, and any change in the patterns and any change in the what's usual, and any change can actually disorder this homogeneous equilibrium relationship between the communities is a conflict trigger, and we've seen this a lot in many areas, and it is still happening, unfortunately. The role of young people are not only peace builders, but also conflict preventers, which is a more degree, let me say, than the peace building, because this is a proactive situation. We don't build the peace on post-conflict, no, but we actually prevent the conflict from happening by building the resilience of the community, by inventing water harvesting projects, by introducing crops that actually doesn't need that much water, by introducing climate smart agriculture, by making maybe pathways between the farmers and the pasturers. I mean, there's a lot of things to do, not only to build the peace, but also to prevent the conflict from happening in the first place. For me now, the meteorological people who actually have the predictions, and the people who are working in the early warning systems are the biggest hero for conflict prevention, because they actually tell the country what's happening, and then the country can be prepared for that. So yes, we are peace builders, climate advocates, and sometimes conflict preventers.
Thank you, Nisrin. Yes, this is already another very complex topic, and this is also why this is such a great panel, because yeah, you all have expertise in another area than being a climate activist. You are superwomen. And yeah, I mean, we went way over time, and unfortunately some people already had to drop off. So we thought that maybe we can ask our engaged audience, who are very engaged in the chat, to please turn on their cameras and ask the questions that they have to our speakers, or maybe just tell us what is on your mind, something that you would maybe like to add. I think that we all have something interesting to share. Please do so. This is now a bit of a different format than we had imagined, but the conversation is so great, and it would be nice if we could keep it going with you, with the audience. And yeah, I think Sheena has one question that maybe we can then all jump into. And yeah, I hope that this is okay for everyone, that we will just keep the discussion going. Okay, great. Yeah.
Should I start? Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, you can, of course, in your answers include what you might have wanted to say in the breakout rooms, and share more of your your background, your work. So feel free to do so. I would start, and you can all answer this, of course. But coming back to you, Anna, and your work with Students for Future, but of course, all of you are active in certain groups, and what I
Oh, Sheena, I think you are frozen and we cannot hear you anymore.
Actually,
Sorry, could you maybe just
am I
repeat the
still?
question?
Yeah.
Now it's good, but maybe
My
could you just,
Wi-Fi
yeah.
turned off for a second. I'm so sorry. Okay, but you can hear me now. Yeah, okay. I'll just start over. Yeah, as you are all activists and active in particular groups and in different groups, and what I often encounter, especially with people who are interested and passionate about topics but not yet activists, is like, how do I start? How do I do this? Or I feel like I'm alone in this. How do I start a group, or how do I engage with others? So, do you have any advice, anything that got you started or that motivated you or that you try to practice within your groups that that helps other people to like really get going and get started and become activists themselves? Yeah, that would be my question to like yeah, I had Anna in mind, but you can all, of course, all have a go at this.
Then maybe I just start and then we can keep it going. Yeah, so there's two different perspectives here, I think. So like from the individual that wants to do something and that doesn't know quite yet where and how and where to go. And then of course the perspective of like the group, how do we engage the new people, for example, that come into the group, and how can we also keep them in the group? I think the group question is a bit easier to answer. What a lot of Fridays for Future groups and also the Students for Future groups have realized really like kind of catches people is if you give them a task right away. So like we have our meetings, our weekly meetings where we discuss everything that is happening. Maybe we're organizing a strike that is upcoming, and new people are coming. It's the best way to engage them is to give them like tasks that anybody can do and that you don't need a lot of knowledge for, or that you don't have to have been a part of the group for a long time to know how to do this, for example. And to just basically catch them, make them feel like they're part of the group already on like the first day. What is really like valuable, I think, for individuals that come and are passionate about the topic and really want to kind of start something, is always easy to start with like things that you can do with your hands, like for example, prepare posters to bring to shops so they can hang it if we're, for example, advertising for the next strike or whatever. Like always things that are kind of engaging and that you can do easily, sort of, and also with your own hands, sort of. And then kind of engage them in conversations like, why are you here? What do you expect, for example, from this work in this group? How would you like to be active? And what we found also for the Students for Future to be very valuable is to figure out what the skills are of each individual, because it's so easy to kind of feel like you need to do everything, which it's not true. If you have a very specific skill and you're a great asset for the group because you take great pictures, then you can be on the demonstration walking around taking great pictures. You know, like there's always everybody has skills that they can sort of use in a very different way for their activism. And if you find this out in the group, then it's also much easier to, for example, direct certain tasks to a certain individual. And I think this is maybe also in part my answer for the individual side of this. Like if you yourself feel you're very passionate about climate change and about climate justice and you want to get going, there's so many groups out there. Just maybe kind of inform yourself what type of groups there are in your area, what type of events are happening, what kind of climate groups there are, and then see if you can actually meet them in person, see what their meetings are like, what their work is like, find out if this is a work that you would also like to keep doing. Like if you really yeah, if you don't think that demonstrations are a good way of protesting, then you probably won't be very happy with the Fridays for Future. But then maybe there's another group that does something else that you could be active with, for example. So I think this is a good way to figuring out what are the skills that I have, what kind of an asset can I be to a certain group, for example, and what is the group really about? What is their main yeah, goal, or also their main mechanism how to get to this goal?
If I maybe just add, I also think that a lot of people are already doing something, but that they do not consider themselves activists, because nowadays it is just such a big word and comes with so much responsibility somehow. And I think this is just something where people are very cautious about, and they feel like, okay, well, you know, everyone is doing this, and I mean, it's okay, I'm not really contributing that big. But I think this is also this mindset that we have to change. Yeah, just something I wanted to add.
Yeah, I can probably add as well that, you know, a river alone doesn't make out a river. It's water, it's super many water molecules that makes the river. And eventually you can flood people and things if you use that. So we all need each other, and we all need to do something. As have been said, you have to take those steps forward, even if you are leading yourself or if you're following someone else. But just make sure that you also jump on the train that are leaving. Because I think that one of for Indigenous peoples, or myself, being from a reindeer herding family, and we are threatened by our lives and by our livelihood and the reindeer that we love. I didn't have a choice to become active or not, because everything I am is depending on that the world is changing, which is a fairly huge task to make. But I'm no water molecule alone. And so I think that just having an idea, doing it, and believing in it makes all the difference. And in particular, when it comes to whatever finding the final decision or the final world that we will have in a couple of years, I can at least say to myself and be honest with it, I did everything in my power to change the opinions and to change the choices of others, even if it was nationally, internationally, or even in my own family. Taking those small actions and pointing out, hey, are you really gonna take that flight? Are you really gonna buy that thing? Do you really need that? I think that we need to change in so many levels in our entire society. And the biggest power that each and every one of us has is our voice. And if we are maybe new to raising our voice or use our voice, just jump on and support someone else's voice. And I think this panel is in particular so interesting because it's feminist led, and women, we are the world changers, and we are the ones that have visions and create societies. And that is a responsibility and something that we all are born with. So support your sisters and use your voice.
Nisrin, you are nodding and smiling. Would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking of my colleagues here remarks or answer to the question, because she was talking about behavior change, and maybe I guess some sort, not always, not 100%, but most of the behavior change issues are very north and western driven right now, because I participated in many events and many panels, and I keep I keep hearing them say, well, the only way to reach net zero is to shift to electric cars. And then I always answer, I mean, if you saw any speech of me giving, I will always say, like, how can we switch to electric cars where only 40 or 30% of population have access to electricity in the first place? Let's imagine we have electric cars. How can we going to charge the electric cars? Going even further, where are these electric cars going to actually move if we don't have enough infrastructure about it? Some people speak about public transportation and metros, and I remember Chile had a revolution or a movement, social movement, because the prices of and Chile is recognized as a South, by the way, because the price of the ticket of the metro was raised. And I always keep thinking, how many years do we need in order to have metros in our countries? I mean, having this perspective of other people's issues and priorities it's really amazing, because it sets the, unfortunately now it's the powerful countries, which is the developed countries, which is the emitters in the first place, sets the priorities of moving to net zero or moving to climate neutral or moving to adaptation or moving to anything, while their issues are our wishes, actually. I wish if I am able to take this discussion about with someone and say to him or her, don't take the flight, but take the train, for example. I wish to reach a point where I say, am I going to spare like $700 on my car and buy a normal car, or should I spend the $700 on an electric car? We, not only in Sudan, but in many countries in Africa, but also in Asia, and we are far behind what you all are speaking about. This is not our reality, and it will not be our reality even in 10 years. People are talking about 2030. I mean, in 2030, I hope that we have enough roads for cars to move in the first place, not mentioning moving to electric cars. And I just repeat that most of your problems, the problems I kept hearing here, are our wishes. I wish if universities in Sudan were only expensive but exist in the first place, because until now we have more than 5 million kids out of school, and this number only for school age. I'm not talking about the higher education at all. Guys, we live in one planet, and if climate change hits us, will hit you too, but you have the power, you have the facilities, you have the resources to adapt to what crisis you will have. We will not. We had a flood last year in 2020, and we are still trying to recover from that flood 1 year after that flood, 1 year after that, and it's still not happening. Not mentioning the diseases, not mentioning, I want you to imagine COVID situation. It's like COVID every day in our countries. Every day is an emergency day. Every day you are not safe. Anything can happen, a heat wave, a dust storm, anything can happen at any moment, and we don't have the minimum of infrastructure, of education, of health, of services, of protection, of income in the first place to actually adapt to that. So whenever we speak about climate change, let's be sensitive, because we're not talking only about climate change, we're talking about climate justice. Let's be sensitive to the issues of the other people who actually doesn't have their food of the day in the first place. And this is not a charity, because we always speak about SDGs, for example, and leaving no one behind. And I always say this to UN people. Well, I hate to bring this like this, but some people, some countries, some nations were already left behind, and we can't even go the same way of development as other countries, because they already used all of the possible emissions, and now we have to find alternatives that we cannot pay for, and we cannot invest in, and we cannot have the techniques for it. I mean, climate justice is more than your own problems. It's more than your internal issues. It's more than what people in countries are suffering because other people in other countries wish to have the same problems that you have.
Thank you, Nisreen. This is why it's so important to have a diverse panel, and it's just really great that you mentioned all of this, and this is somehow a very perfect closing to our climate justice webinar series, I feel like, because you just put everything on the table and we all want to learn as well every day. And yeah, it's just really great that I can learn from you. And I hope that I can, everything that I learn from you, that I can keep telling other people so that they can give it to others. And yeah, I'm just really grateful that we can all be here and listen to you and talk to each other and keep learning from each other. And I think there was one question from the audience. Maybe before we can slowly wrap up, from Valerie, I hope she's still there. How can intersectional feminists fit more closely in the just transition framework? In case anyone wants to take that, or in case Valerie wants to also take that one.
And I can probably say something about it, but no, so what we see is that, of course, people and women in particular are the ones that are firstly and mostly affected by climate change. And providing resources, from what I've heard from my friends around our Indigenous world, is that providing resources and supporting those organizations that are women-led often benefits the entire community and the families of those peoples. So I think that is something that that we all can have in mind when we talk about solutions and when we talk about politics, that it always have to have this nuance of diversity, as Nisrin are talking about, that those that are already affected shouldn't be the ones that pays the price for this climate transition that we need. It is the countries that are the most polluting that should be the ones transitioning, and the people in the city that are using most of the resources and are emitting the most in our country, for example. So we need to always have this nuance and the lens of the diversity and the different issues that we do have. And I also think that bringing forth women's voices to those places where they are lacking is a very important statement that we can all take in our all everyday work and in the projects that we do put forth, or when we make allies. So that has been something that I've been supported by different women, the women in position power, that they have invited me as an Indigenous into those spaces, providing me a voice from people on the ground and supporting people on the ground and those solutions coming forth and reminding us all of these different nuances that we have. So I think that's some of the things that that comes to my mind.
Sorry, I was just checking if that was a question in the chat, but it was more of a appreciation, which I totally share. And I would, come back to what both of you, Nisreen and Jani, now mentioned, sort of. But for me, I think generally it's always a problem as we mostly, or our countries mostly, discuss the climate crisis as this national issue. So there's no connection aside from that, and truly tackling it as a global issue. And then and that was some sort of already in the question, really viewing it as this intersectional issue that it is. And I think I tried to include this in one of the questions in the beginning, that, for example, we see that also in countries of the global north, that generally, as Nisreen rightly said, have more opportunities to do more, but they actually don't. But then within their countries, you see that marginalized people are also more threatened by the climate crisis, but there's not even like awareness about that. As you rightly said, Jani, at one point, like the EU and many others not even being aware that we have indigenous people in Europe, or this fight about, okay, that many low-income people, people with disabilities, or Black, Indigenous, and people of color also in so-called global North countries face the climate crisis more severely, and so do women, of course. So yeah, there's this, it is a complicated issue, but I just feel like it's not always treated as a complicated issue, and that's just so sad, because yeah, we leave so many people and so many voices, and therefore so many solutions out, because I think a lot of people have solutions and have ideas what we can do, especially young climate activists, but yeah, are simply not heard. So yeah, just wanted to add that at this point. So yeah, we are slowly, sadly, coming to an end. I could talk to you all evening, but I would just ask all three of you, is there anything you wanted to add at this point? Any question that you wanted to add, something, any additional point that we haven't talked about that you would like to raise? Then yeah, I would open the floor again, and if not, I would ask you for your visions, if you wanted to share these with us. But yeah, maybe on the first question, is there anything that you would like to add, or any other point that you wanted to raise?
I might comment on the equity perspective, because as Jani just mentioned, the UNFCCC, or the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, is built into two main pillars, or two main values, which is shared but common responsibility, and the historical responsibility of the developed countries and the big emitters. That's why we are talking about equity, not equality. Equity means that if you have someone who's starving, and someone who's hungry, and someone who's okay, and someone who's full, you can't give one apple to each, because the full will not be able to eat the apple. The okay person doesn't need to eat the apple. The hungry one, we might give him an apple, but you cannot give one apple to someone who's starving in the first place. You have to give him at least 3 apples, let me say. So the understanding of equity perspective itself, and putting it into shape and shoes of climate change, is really important to us to actually be able to analyze the problem and micro search into the issue, and maybe find a solution for that. Otherwise, we will keep wasting time until the catastrophe happen. And at that point, unfortunately, none of us will be safe, but some countries will be able to delay the impacts more, and maybe give some fading promises to their people, that because no one can actually challenge nature. We've seen that in every tsunami, in every hurricane, in every earthquake, and every flood, in every natural disaster, which is actually climate crisis. It is undefeatable. So why we need to reach that point before we actually make an actual changes, and before we push not only ourselves but the community around us and our policymakers to actually take actions to that.
Thank you so much, Nisreen, for adding this point. Any of the other two wanted to draw on this or add something? No. Then I would go ahead and despite and we had that in the questions also about climate anxiety. So this rather sometimes frustrating topic, but yeah, I would love to ask all three of you for your vision that you would have in terms of climate justice for the future. Anything that you would like to share at this point. And yeah, Jani, you go first.
I can start. No, so vision. I know because my people have been telling me that we once lived in harmony with nature. And there are still people that remember how to do so. So I think that having our worldview, the Indigenous people's worldview of how we are with nature as a central part when we are forced, because we are going to be forced to build our new worlds together based on the best available knowledge, when that includes Indigenous sciences and Indigenous worldviews. So that is my vision and my hope.
Thank you. And Anna, Nisreen, whoever wants to go next.
Okay, I can go. I think my vision will be that we will live in a fair world that actually recognize the needs of others and understand the problems of different nations and live in solidarity with that. And the vision also I have for the climate movement, that we will finally stop talking and start acting in different levels, the self, family, country, continents, and then the world. And we will be really caring for the future of the planet, future of us, and future of the next generation.
Yeah, I think that what we need is to overthrow the system, especially the patriarchal system. So my vision would be a feminist, a female-led matriarchy, if you want, because Jani has made this point several times and made it clear, and I truly believe that this is true, that women in power make like an environment possible where ideas can flourish that haven't yet, and that are impossible to be implemented in the system that we have as it is right now. I think that we need to, when I say we, I mean the global north, the white colonizers of the global north. We need to finally address the injustice system that we have brought upon the world. We need to address this openly. We need to find a way to completely overthrow the system, because in this system where we are still the colonizers and still the oppressors, there cannot be a just world. There cannot be climate justice in a world where we still take the land of Indigenous people, for example.
It's so sad that in online events, no one is clapping in the end. That's something that I'm always really missing. We were at an event last time and everybody was clapping, and it was just such a nice feeling, because I cannot tell you now all how amazing all of your thoughts were. So thank you for that. I don't really have anything great to say because you just talked it all. But yeah, maybe Sheena, we can move to our closing remarks of our webinar.
Sure. Yeah, first of all, thank you. Thank you all three for your perspectives, for all your work that you do. A lot of people also don't think activism is work. It's very hard work. I know this. So, and I really liked, Nisreen, your advice on getting more sleep. This is something I'm definitely not doing, but yeah, I'll try to be better. So yeah, first of all, a huge thank you to all of you. It's been such an honor to have you, to learn from you. And yeah, I can't wait to watch the recording and then have all of your insights flow into the policy briefing and share it with you. Yeah, this has been the final webinar. It's been such a fun and interesting journey. I can only speak for CFFP, but going on this climate justice journey has been new for us. The topic has always been important, and we talked about this already, as activists and feminists are always underfunded and not well supported. We just never had the resources to take it on. We are super happy that with our amazing partners at the Ban Ki-moon Center, we had the chance to take on this webinar series. And yeah, it's been so much fun. We had 7 very rich, very exciting, very fun webinars on several topics, all very important and very dear to our hearts. And yeah, it's been a fun ride. And just also wanted to say big thanks to Jessica, who's been just great, done such great job and has put a lot of work into this whole project, and also everyone else at Ban Ki-moon Center. Special thanks also to Katarina and everyone at my team. So yeah, we would love to see all of you at hopefully another event in another project. Stay connected, stay in touch with us. If you ever need anything, ever have an idea for a collab, always feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, I can't wait to follow all of your work. It's been amazing. And yeah, take care of yourselves, and hope to see you soon.
And have lots of fun and interesting engagements at COP. I know you will all make the best of it, and just, yeah, I'm sure it will be great to see all of the other young activists and just motivate each other and exchange energies. This is something that I think we've been all missing. So yeah, I also really hope that I can visit CFFP in Berlin one time and actually meet in person and all of you. And yeah, we'll definitely keep in touch. We will stay connected because it's very important. And thank you everyone who stayed on this late for our online event. And yes, talk to all of you soon, and have a great evening or morning or afternoon.
Yeah. Bye. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.